Great nations write their autobiographies in 3 manuscripts: the book of their deeds, the book of their words, and the book of their art. Dear viewers, you certainly know that the first self-propelled road vehicle was invented by French engineer and mechanic Nicolas Joseph Cugnot. This happened in 1769. The peculiarity of this vehicle was that it was powered by steam engines and had the speed of only 4 kilometers per hour. Then, Carl Benz invented the first 3-wheeled 2-seater vehicle with gasoline-powered engine. This car developed the speed of up to 15 kilometers per hour, thus overtaking a man for the first time. And already in 1899, a car with 2 electric motors was presented, developing the speed of more than 100 kilometers per hour. Since then, people have created a huge number of vehicles, depending on their needs. We still see the fruits of technological progress. But let's get back to our favorite topic and talk about horses again. The equestrian equipment that I'm holding in my hands has evolved over 5,000 to 6,000 years. In today's episode, we will talk about the stages in the evolution of equestrian equipment. Well, it is an interesting theme, isn't it? Then, let's get started.
Алдыңғы бағдарламаларда түркілердің соғыс жорықтарынан кейін европалықтар кентаврды ойлап тауып.
In the previous episodes, we told that after the military campaigns of the Turkic tribes in Europe, the myth of the centaur was born. He was called the god of war. There is another interesting fact. In ancient Rome, the goddess and patron of horses, Epona, was worshipped by Celtic tribes. There is even a holiday in honor of her, which is celebrated every year on December the 18th. During the celebrations, people pay tribute to the horses and feed them. Even the Romans worshipped this goddess because they had developed military traditions. The Kazakhs also have a tradition of honoring horses. The fact that a man saddled a wild horse and invented the harness was a great breakthrough for the entire world civilization. Our ancestors understood perfectly well that without good horse equipment, you cannot go far. The first saddles were made of either fabric or soft leather. This is evidenced by the artifacts found in the Pazyryk and Burel burial mounds. 2 simple patchwork quilts filled with hay or reindeer fur tied by a large wide belt served as a saddle.
Вы видите процесс реконструкции лошадей. Это лошадь из 11-го кургана. Раскоп производился в 98-99 году. Сейчас они приобрели свой экспозиционный вид. Они сейчас сохраняются и вот.
You can see the process of reconstruction of horses' remains. This horse was found in the 11th mound. The excavation was carried out in 1998-1999. Now they have acquired their expositional form. They are still preserved and are displayed in our National Museum. We also studied saddle reconstruction. At first, we did not know its position. In fact, we had some kind of shapeless mass. Studying these monuments, I went to the Hermitage. The Hermitage has the finds from the Pazyryk mound, which is also the same culture. They were in a very good condition. Having studied them, we already understood what shape the saddle could be, the position of the saddle. It was very important for us to know everything, and we understood the shape. There are 2 arches that hold a wooden plate. Inside, it is filled with hay or hair, that is, with materials that were soft and comfortable. There are 2 pillows and an empty space in the middle. It is done in order it doesn't rub the horse's back and a rider too. and we tried to make experiments on the same saddle to know is it comfortable to ride on such a saddle. It was absolutely comfortable. Our riders tried it. They said it was very convenient.
На лошади как удобно ли ездить, возможно ли вообще на таком ездить. Абсолютно удобное, которое наездники наши попробовали, говорят, очень удобно и очень комфортно.
In Europe, saddles appeared only in the 4th century. This is evidenced by the decree of the Emperor Theodosius of 335 stating that the weight of the harness of post horses should not exceed 27 kilograms. At the same time, it is well known that during this period, nomadic tribes of the Huns have been already actively using wooden lightweight saddles.
Бұрынғы замандарда, сақтарда, ғұндарда ағаш, қаңқалы, орнықты, толық жабдықталған ер тұрманға отыру.
In the ancient Saka era, it was comfortable to ride on a wooden saddle. It was equal to riding a modern motorcycle. Nomads could pass long distances in a short time. They could easily fight while sitting up in the saddle.
Сол жерде жақсы орнықты отырып, соғысуға, сайысуға үлкен мүмкіндік тудырды. Онан кейін үлкен дүние көне түркілердің ойлап тапқан.
The next important detail in the evolution of equestrian harness is the invention of stirrups by the ancient Turks. The stirrup was a big innovation on the level of modern turbocharged engines.
Үлкен бір жаңалық болды деп айтуға болады.
In order to awaken the country, its history should be awakened. Mirzatai Joldasbekov. Dear viewers, there is another interesting fact. Some jugs found in the mounds of the Saka and Huns periods had the patterns depicting horses with soft leather saddles. Dmitry Savinov, one of the foreign researchers commenting on the development of horse breeding among the Turks and the origin of the Karabayrs, said that the weight and construction of medieval horse equipment had increased significantly. Thus, over time, the excellent equipment of a horse and a warrior became the main indicator of high Turkic culture. Scientist Sergei Rudenko wrote that there have never been equestrian accessories among the Siberian Scythian tribes in Europe. Nevertheless, the horse equipment of the nomads gradually changed the life of Europeans. The Kazakh harness is a direct continuation of the harness made by the Saka, Huns, and ancient Turkic tribes. The number of saddle models used by the Kazakh people until the beginning of the 20th century was more than 24. These are the models Kanbasyer, Kuzbasyer, Balamgolyer, Kurandyer, Kizayer, and so on. One of the great advantages of our national culture is customs and technologies. The most common type of saddle among the Kazakhs was the saddle made of birch.
Қазіргі түсініктегі ағаш қаңқасы бар, тұрман жабдығы бар. Осындай толық ерлер жаңағы нағы қазіргі пошымымен көне түркі дәуірінде, ғұн дәуірінің соңында осы нелердің.
It is known that the ancient Turks used the same wooden saddles as modern ones. There are also old prototypes of harnesses and saddles. They do not have a wooden frame and were made of fabric, a pillow-shaped saddle packed with hay. This is proved by the valuable artifacts found in the Birel mounds. In addition, there are several artifacts related to the Pazyryk culture. There is a prototype of a harness and a saddle from the Altai territory. The present, modern saddle, dating back to the late Turkic era, is a saddle from the 6th century. Such finds date back to the 5th century as well. Such saddles and harnesses were widespread in the Eurasian steppes from Japan to Western Europe. Modern science fully recognizes that all this was invented by the Turkic tribes and nomads. Let me tell you an interesting fact. There is such a medical term, the Turkish saddle. This is the name of a small compartment at the base of the skull. In the middle of this compartment is the space in which the pituitary gland is located. the control center of the human endocrine system. In shape, it resembles a saddle from which this name came. Well, why exactly the Turkish saddle?
Жаңағы ғылымда ер тұрманның көшпел түркі халықтарына тән екендігінің бір айқын дәлелі.
History is the depository of great actions, the witness of what is past, the example and instructor of the present, and monitor to the future. Miguel de Cervantes. According to archaeological excavations, the first mention of humans' clothing dates back to the ancient Paleolithic period. Those garments were simple and eliminated discrimination based on gender or social status. Another interesting fact, during the Neolithic period, there were basic patterns of clothing that have not lost their relevance to this day. This means that our modern style of dress appeared about 7,500 years ago. Then evolution began. People began to dress differently depending on their gender and social status. The same tendency was seen in the development of saddles. If earlier it was just a piece of cloth filled with hay, then depending on demand and purpose, the saddle design was constantly improved. There are many types of saddles. However, since ancient times, masters have divided them into three main groups. The first type of saddle is small and compact ashamai, designed for children under 5 years of age. We all know that Kazakhs organized festivities when a child got on a horse. He was seated on his first ashamai. The second type of saddle is the one for adult men. They are lightweight, compact, and less elaborately decorated. The third group is saddles for women. They are more massive and heavy. The seat is flatter. These saddles were often decorated with gold, silver, and precious stones. All saddles were necessarily covered with leather. There are two main technologies for making saddles. In the first variant, the saddle is made from a single piece of wood. Such a saddle is called sommier or chapayer. There is also a second method of manufacturing saddles called kurandiyer, when every part is cut out separately and then all this is put together. But the saddle itself is not worth anything. Other horse harness is also necessary: belts, cruppers, and bridle. I am carving a saddle out of willow. The rear is flat and the front is higher. Let it serve to a horse and his rider. It is better than any saddle in the world.
Атты ер тұрманмен сыйлау енді ол деген сөз, жаңа қазіргі ұғыммен үлкен бір шетелдік қымбат көлікті сыйлаумен бірдей.
Owning a horse with a good harness and a saddle was similar to having an expensive foreign car. For example, earlier, at competitions, winners could be presented with a camel or a set of horse harness. This means equal importance of gifts.
Атты ер тұрманымен ат сыйлайды. Ал үлкен ауқаттары байлар, үлкен нелерде, астарда, тойларда, мерекелерде бас бәйге ретінде осындай жауымен атан түйе немесе ер тұрманмен ат сыйлау несі болған.
It was rare when everyone, depending on their financial situation, made gifts. Sometimes a person could present his horse with a full set of harnesses. But in such a situation, they never give a bridle.
Жүгенді біреуге сыйлауға болмайды. Жүгенді барын сыйлап тұрса да жүгенін алып қалады да орнына ана өз жүгенін тағып алып кетеді. Осындай бір қиын бар. Малдың басы, аузына сілекей жұққан ауыздықтағы жүгенді біреуге сыйлау деген.
There is even an expression. Bridle spotted with horse saliva must not be presented to others. This is a kind of sign. There is one more sign. Do not step over the saddle. It is not allowed to kick the saddle. The Kazakhs consider any item to be sacred if they absorbed the smell of horses. Chronicles, contemporaries, biographies, narratives. All these are the fruits of our history. Akhmet Baitursinov. We have already said that there are about 60 equine coat colors in the world. The most interesting thing is that there are more than 300 such names for coat colors in the Kazakh language. As for the saddles, representatives of different nations across the world have at most 1 or 2 names for this horse equipment. And our people have more than 20 of them. Moreover, each tribe, each clan had its own personalized and unique harness. This is evidenced by the records of outstanding historical researchers. On page 490 of the book by Russian geographer Pyotr Semyonov-Tenshensky, Turkestan Territory of the 19th century, we can find the following statement. Horse breeding is one of the most important branches of animal husbandry in the Turkestan Territory. Central Asia has been famous for its horses since time immemorial. The life and natural conditions of the semi-nomadic population of the Turkestan Territory are favorable for the development of horse breeding. Continuous migrations in the nomadic way of life, as well as continuous wars, which took place often in the life of the local population, put horse breeding in the first place and became the most important area for the Turks. The Russians have a cavalry saddle, and it is essentially the copy of the Naiman saddle. The Russians borrowed it, conquering the Turkic tribes in the southeast, which lived in the foothills of the Altai Mountains. Then the saddle was renamed cavalry. Initially, it was made from a single piece of wood, but then when it became difficult to staff the Russian army, the saddle technology was replaced with simpler versions, replacing some parts with iron. Such saddles as Argenyer, Naimanyer, Oisinyer, Morinyer are widely known. The Kazakh people have always been famous for their craftsmen, including ones who made horse equipment. In ancient times, our ancestors knew exactly which tribe and which region a guest had come from.
Сол замандағы бай бағландардың, мынау көсемдердің деп айтсақ та болады, мысалға ел арасында болыстардың.
In ancient times, the saddles of the wealthy nobles, leaders and warriors were the most beautiful and expensive ones. They were decorated with the most precious stones.
Сәндеп отырған, арнайы тапсырыспенен жасап отырған. Олардың жаңағы тапсырыс берген кезде ақы көз салу керек па? Оған мысалға
The owner knew wherever he was, his saddle was his reputation. For example, by the saddle of a person who came to a Kurultai, a wedding or a dinner party, it was possible to determine where he came from, what tribe or clan he belonged to, and what social position he occupied.
Ер адамның мысалға құрылтай болып жатады, той-томалақ болып жатады, мысалға болыстар ас беріп жатады. Сол кезде сол жаңағы жылқысына мініп келген адамның қай елден, қай рудан, қай жерден, солтүстіктен келді ма, соның бәрін жаңағы өзінің сән салтанатымен байқап отырған.
Another interesting fact, Kazakhs necessarily included a set of horse harness in the bride's dowry. For example, Abay's bride, Aygurim, had the dowry with a complete set of horse equipment, decorated with silver, Kazakh ornament, and precious stones.
Қыздың жасауына жаңағы ең бір қомақты бөлігі ер тұрманы. Өйткені ол
One of the most expensive things in the girl's dowry is a set of horse harness. Why is it given? The horse served as a means of transportation. A young woman who was getting married needed to move about. She can have different horses, but never the harness and the saddle. Therefore, for such cases, a very beautiful set is made on order. It was adorned with gold and precious stones. While for a man, it was a whole tragedy not to have his own saddle. Not even a tragedy, but a shame.
Abilkhan Kasteev өзінің сатып алынған жұмысында керемет көрсеткен. Мысалға біз айтатын болсақ, бұл жерде
The work of Abilkhan Kasteev, the bridegroom, reflects the splendor of Kazakh life in the best possible way. It depicts a woman, a man, and an elderly woman. The painting depicts a man on horseback and beautiful details of the design of horse equipment. Thus, Kasteev showed a high level of culture of the Kazakh people. The woman also rides a festively decorated horse. It is interesting that in Europe, women rode horses sitting aside, while the Kazakh women rode horses in the same way as men. And this is also part of our culture. To show the horse in all its glory, the Kazakhs entirely decorated all the horse's equipment. We see that our folk craftsmen brilliantly possessed the art of jewelry, tanning, and carpentry. For example, you can see how the masters skillfully decorated leather belts. A spirited 5-year-old horse, a beautiful kamshi, and a harness serve as an adornment of a man. Dear viewers, our people had some traditions and rules for wearing the whip, kamshi. If a person entered the house with the kamshi and it was pressed against the handle, then it meant that he came to argue about something. Scientist Ahmet Taktabai counted the total of 22 types of kamshi and 15 ways of using it. There is another interesting fact. Russians called kamshi nogaika. In the 15th century, the Russians bought Kazakh horses from the Nogais. Then, for the first time, they saw kamshi in the hands of the Nogais and Kipchuks and called it nogaika. The Kazakh people attached great importance to the kamshi, and it can be seen in the words of Marshal Koybalsan. He said, "You cannot do anything with these people as long as they have the kamshi in their hands." Another interesting fact, in the old days the so-called barimta was practiced, but the Kazakhs never used edged weapons, only the large kamshi, the blow of which could kill a wolf. Dirau kamshi is a type of whip woven from processed cowhide. It was long, thick, and was used as a weapon and as a means of defense. The kamshi was used for matchmaking. The groom's relatives or his father hung the kamshi on the lattice of the yurt where the bride lived. If the bride's father returned the kamshi, this meant a refusal. If the kamshi was left in place, it meant their consent, and it was believed that the bride living in the yurt is already married off. In general, kamshi performs several functions in the life of our people. It was used for several purposes. First, it is designed to provide guidance when riding a horse, control the herd. In addition, until the 19th and 20th centuries, the kamshi served as a sign of authority in the hands of bees and Huns. In addition, the kamshi is a weapon woven from 3 or 4 or even 48 leather cords. The most frightful, of course, was doir kamshi. In addition, the role of the kamshi in various Kazakh traditions and customs is great. The kamshi is put in the cradle with a child. Now let's look at the history of kamshi. A gilded kamshi was found next to the golden man buried 2,500 years ago in our territories. This proves that since then, princes and rulers have always held it in their hands as a symbol of power. In addition, during the time of the Huns, the whip was used as a real weapon. The first who brought kamshi to Europe were the Huns. The whip was depicted in the hands of the Huns troops at the turn of the 4th, 5th centuries. Before that, people in Europe did not know anything at all about whips, boots, and trousers. The person who makes saddles is called turmanshi. In fact, turmanshi is a universal master of carpentry, blacksmithing, jewelry, as well as sewing and weaving. It takes a lot of skill to make the perfect saddle that will be comfortable for people's backs and easy ride. Most of these saddles are made of willow, felt, poplar, or birch. Birch saddles are especially popular with men. Such saddles are durable, do not crack when they are processed, the natural pattern of wood can be seen, and it is very beautiful. Since ancient times, genuine masters who made horse equipment have always been held in high esteem, since this work requires a lot of labor and time. First, when the wooden saddle is completely ready, it needs to be covered with leather on both sides. Then masters decorate the saddle with jewelry. It also takes a huge amount of effort and time. Plating with silver and gold is in itself a very delicate and complex work. Silver binding is made by melting silver and attaching it to the harness using a special tube. The same process took place with gold plating of the saddle. Mercury and the same special tube were used to soften gold. This is a very harmful work, and now masters don't do it. Now let's talk about the manufacturing process itself. The craftsman first cuts a large piece of wood into a saddle shape. Then it is polished with water. If a lot of salt is added to the water to make a saturated solution and the saddle is soaked in it from time to time, the structure becomes stronger. The prepared saddles were wrapped in cow dung and dried in the sun or in a calm shade. After that, the saddle was covered with leather. Then it was decorated with ornaments and patterns. Then it is the turn for making the harness. Interestingly, the craftsman did not make it in advance, since the style, skin color, ornaments were selected exclusively for the ready saddle. And only then, this set of bridles, harnesses, and other items become a unique work of art, and its value will increase.
Негізі әдеби тілде ер тоқым жасаушы деп нетілмейді, тұрманшы деп аталады.
In fact, in a literary language, the saddle maker is not called a saddler, but a turmanchi. This is a unique profession. Such a person should be a master of carpentry, then be able to work with leather, be a jeweler, be able to work with precious stones. That is why only true masters are engaged in producing saddles.
Сондықтан енді бұл ерді жасайтын қас шеберлер жасайды енді көбінесе.
Dear viewers, in a very short time we talked about Kazakh horse harness and saddles. In general, the 30 minutes episode is clearly not enough to describe everything in detail, and therefore we will return to this topic again in the future. Our theme today is, if your horse died, keep the saddle. Let's take a look at the hidden motive of this phrase. What is the significance of this piece of dried wood for the Kazakhs? The modern type of saddles was created in ancient times and has not changed much. Since then, almost all Kazakh traditions and customs have been directly related to horses and harness. That is, in fact, for a Kazakh, the loss of a saddle means the loss of roots, traditions, and culture. For this reason, the saddle and harness are a valuable relic of the Kazakh people. We started this episode with the history of first cars. Humans have invented everything to get where they wanted. Starting from a simple scooter, a bicycle, a high-speed train, a helicopter, or an airplane, all this has already been invented and powered by electricity and hydrogen. Now look at this first steam car that traveled at 4 kilometers per hour, and this car that can reach 100 kilometers in 2.5 seconds. Now, look at this. In fact, this is the saddle that poet Abai used to ride on, and this is a modern saddle. There is no difference. Our ancestors, the Turks, invented this harness as a working tool that allowed people to travel comfortably long distances on horses. And that will never change, even if technology takes humans to the moon. This is what you can and should be proud of, so as to preserve the heritage of our ancestors. I am Akjol Tokan. Goodbye. See you soon. Watch us on the Qazaq TV's YouTube channel and leave your comments.